Hi everyone, Captain Curran here again. Tonight I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about proper shoe fitting. So a lot of new runners tend to get injured, and there's a lot of reasons that can happen. Typically an increase in frequency or intensity too quickly, improper nutrition, but a major reason that new runners get injured is actually improper gear. So the awesome thing about running is that you don't really need a lot of gear. However, you do want to make sure that you invest in a good pair of shoes because you're going to be with these guys for hundreds of miles, hopefully. And I get this question a lot. People say, what's the best shoe? And the answer is, and this isn't a cop-out, the answer is it really depends. And it depends on a lot of things. So if you're a newer runner or you've been running, even if you've been running a long time, please don't take recommendations from friends on what the best shoe is, because what works for somebody might not necessarily work for you. And so when you're finding the right pair of shoes, there's a couple things to consider. The biggest thing that you should consider is your gait. So what is your body doing biomechanically when you're running? Typically, our brains have trained us to be heel strikers because most running shoes these days, and shoes in general, have a lot of cushion in the heel. So our brain wants to land on that nice soft cushion. And then, typically somebody will make contact with the ground on their heel first, and then they'll roll onto their toe and they'll toe off to take the next step. If you know anything about your personal gait, you might know that you either heel strike or you are more of a toe striker or a forefoot striker. But what you also want to know is what you're doing, what your body's doing, how it's repositioning weight when you're doing that transition from your heel to your toe. So there's something called overpronation, which you would want to correct for if you tended to do that. So overpronation is when you make first contact with the ground with your heel, and then as you're transitioning, you tend to roll in a little bit. So people that are flat-footed, that don't have good arches, they tend to do that because they don't have that support. Their body doesn't have that good arch there. So somebody like that is going to need a little bit more here in the arch. And what you're going to be looking for is a stability or a motion control shoe. And you can, if you go to your local running store, if you know you're a flat-footed runner or you get a gait analysis done, you can go to your local running store and you can say, I need to be fitted for a stability shoe. If you don't know what your gait looks like, they can also do a video analysis for you, which is really helpful. You can actually learn a lot about what your body's doing when you're running from having them break down a gait analysis. But a stability shoe is going to have some kind of component here in the arch that's basically going to provide that support that your body doesn't provide because you don't have good arches. So it's going to be either a denser piece of foam, sometimes it's plastic, sometimes they play a little bit with the shape of the shoe just to provide a little bit more stability in that region. And then if you can also do something called, so that's overpronation. Again, when you're transitioning weight, you're tending to kind of collapse. And then there's also something called supination. So supination would be when you tend to you make contact with the ground on your forefoot, and then instead of rolling in or distributing the weight more evenly, you kind of stay out here. So you make contact and you run like this. So with both of supination and overpronation, your body is being strained in different ways. So somebody who supinates, they're not distributing the weight of the motion evenly, so they tend to be really tight in their posterior chain. So we're talking Achilles, calves, hamstrings, because they just don't have that weight distribution. And And so somebody who tends to supinate, they're going to want to make sure that they, one, are rolling out all the time, stretching their Achilles, stretching that posterior chain, just to make sure that it doesn't get tighter and tighter and tighter. And they also want to make sure that if they're this type of runner, that they're not in a shoe that has a stability component. And the reason is, if you have a component here that's providing that additional support, you're already out here, it's going to tip you out even further. So now we're talking your IT band's going to be tight, where it connects on your knee, you might have hip problems. So this is really, your body is a chain, and if you don't know what it's doing and you're just picking up the coolest looking pair of shoes, then you might be screwing with your body, and you're not going to really enjoy running if you're in pain all the time. It's as simple as that. So I would recommend, there's 3 F's to shoe fitting. The most important is the function of the shoe. So that's what we were just talking about. Is it a neutral shoe, or is it a stability shoe? Does it have that component here for that additional support? And then the next thing to consider, the next F, is the fit. So once you find out, am I in a neutral shoe, am I in a stability shoe, then you want to see how it feels on your foot. So every brand's going to be a little bit different. Every model's going to be a little bit different. The last consideration should be the fashion. So I know they come out with all these awesome bells and whistles, but you really don't want to take somebody's recommendation, and you really don't want to walk into your local Foot Locker and be like, wow, those are sick. That's the coolest color. Let me get those Yeezys. You really don't want to do that. So as you can see from my rambling, shoe fitting is really, really important. A few other things to keep in mind. You shouldn't have the same running shoes that you had for basic training, okay? Hopefully most of you run more than twice a year for a PT test. Maybe you don't. But even if you're walking around in your shoes and you're not running in them, you're putting miles on them. So keep that in mind. A shoe starts to break down and lose its functionality between 300 and 500 miles. So depending on the shoe, if it's a little bit sturdier shoe, you're going to get 500 miles. If it's more lightweight, you're going to probably get closer to 300. So just keep that in mind, because you could think you could get all fitted, but if you got fitted 7 years ago and you're running 30 miles a week, it's time for a new pair of shoes. Some other things to keep in mind, again, you go to your local running store, run specialty store, here in Colorado. The Runner's Roost is a great one. I know there's one in the Springs. There's a bunch up in the Denver metro. If you have no clue what you're doing when you're running and you need some direction, because it can be overwhelming when you go into a running store, just ask them to do a gait analysis. It's free. It takes 5 minutes. They'll give you a pair of shoes to try on. They'll throw you on the treadmill, and they'll take a slow motion video of what you're doing. And then if you don't have time to do that, or you kind of want to, see if you can figure it out yourself, there's a couple exercises that you can do to kind of at least get going in the right direction. So one of the things you can do just to test your arches is you can just stand on one foot and you can do it to a squat, so a one-legged squat. And then it's helpful if you have like somebody watching you squat, and you want to have them watch your arch. So can you still see some light through your arch? Or are you completely flat against the ground? And you want to do that on both sides. It's not always the case that you'll have the same arch on both sides. Myself, I have one arch that's really good and the other one that's not very good. So that's something that you might want to know, because again, you might not want to go with a really stable shoe if you know that you tend to supinate on one side. So you can kind of play around with that. So you can have a neutral shoe that's a little bit firmer, so it's still going to provide some motion control without actually pushing you in one direction or the other. And I mean, these can, every case can get pretty complicated, but that's why it's important to go to a run specialty store and just invest, the money and, more importantly, the time. If you do it once, you can find out, hey, I'm a neutral runner, hey, I'm a stability runner, or I need a stability shoe. And in most cases, you're going to stay that way. There's some exceptions like pregnancy, people's arches can fall. If you gain or lose weight, your gait can change. But by and large, if you get fitted once, if somebody tells you this is the type of shoe you need, you only need to do it once. So then you can start kind of like educating yourself. You can look up things online. You can, if you go to any brand's website, you can find, okay, I want a neutral category shoe. I want a stability category shoe. Another thing you can do just on your own at home is just look at the wear pattern on your shoes. So I was saying before that I tend to run kind of unevenly. So if you were to look at this shoe, you can look right here in the arch, and you can see a lot of wear in here. So this is the side that I tend to overpronate on. So you got some heel wear here. So again, I'm coming in, and then I'm collapsing before I toe off, and you can very clearly see that. So if you're a more neutral runner and you're not tending to go one way or the other, you might see a generally even wear pattern, and that's a good sign that you don't need a shoe that has that extra stability. Now let me show you my other shoe. So this is the same pair of shoes, been wearing them the same amount of miles. Look at the wear pattern on this guy. So this one, we don't see a lot of heel wear at all compared to this one. We don't see any wear really in the arch. This is like brand new. But we see a lot of wear in here. So on this side, I'm literally making contact with the ground on the outside, and I'm not rolling in at all. And coincidentally, on this side of my body, I have a lot of hamstring issues because, again, that is really tight in there. I'm not distributing that weight when I'm transitioning. So it's something that I just need to be aware of on that side of my body. So, as you can see, you can tell a lot just by picking up your shoes and looking at the wear pattern. And again, this is kind of a crazy example. And most of you probably won't have something like this, but if you don't, then that might be a good indication that you're a more neutral runner. And if you're a neutral runner, then that's just going to be your cushion shoe. There's all different kinds of weights that you can get. You can get more lightweight. You can get like the ultra plush cushion, but you don't need any kind of component here, okay? Because you don't want to. If you don't need it, you don't want to put yourself in that. So yeah, those are just, some tips for shoe fitting. I could probably talk about this all day, but I would love to entertain any questions that you guys have. You can post them here. I've worked kind of on and off in the run specialty industry for about 5 years. I love talking to runners of all different ability levels, and I can't stress enough that getting the proper equipment is essential to really enjoying the sport and staying healthy. So hopefully this was helpful, and hit me up if you guys have any questions.